Thank you all for joining me this morning. So I know it's 10 a.m. here in Ireland. It's 4 a.m. for me. I'm in from Texas. So if I look a little slow, that's because it's 4 a.m. It has nothing to do with your Irish whiskey from last night. So we're going to talk here this morning about the security implications from the rise of the machines, artificial intelligence, or as we'll get to learn a little bit, artificial not so quite intelligent. So my background, CEO of a data security company called CyberFortress. We focus on that safe second copy of your information so that when something does go bad, you can always get your information back without having to start over from scratch. Background in history, talked on the radio quite a bit. I can talk on stage in front of people a little bit, not quite as well. So on the radio, you don't have to see me, so I can make silly faces or whatever else, and it doesn't really matter. But hosted a radio program, which is now a podcast called Cyber Talk Radio. If you'd like to check it out, it should be on all the podcast apps. And if you use a podcast app that you don't see the program on there, hit me up on Twitter, BPIATT. We'll get you a Cyber Talk Radio t-shirt, and then we'll fix the fact that it's not available on your favorite podcast app. The last thing, for those of you familiar with open source software, I was on the core team that founded the OpenStack project, which has now started the Open Infrastructure Foundation. So helping to drive and power cloud computing technology across a number of places, including CERN, so the Large Hadron Collider that sadly I think we've powered it off for right now. But when it runs experiments, it uses the OpenStack software on the back end to be able to handle the data processing. So there'll be three things that we'll come through and you'll get to learn about here today. So kind of what's the difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning and deep learning and all of those. I'll cover that highlight and where are they at today. The second piece is that kind of how are hackers actually using this information. And then lastly, what can you do to defend against the fact that these criminals are starting to take advantage of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. So first up, where are these technologies at today? So how many folks have an iPhone and use Siri? Anybody here? Okay, how many folks have an iPhone? So yeah, that question I ask is, and use Siri? And I only got one or two hands. So Siri is probably the number one example of where artificial intelligence is at today. So with all of the resources and money and everything that Apple has, Siri's reasonably good at answering some basic questions for you, like, what's the weather today in Dublin? And she'll tell you whatever she thinks it is right now that she's reading off of some website of the internet. But if you ask any sort of complicated question, even to something that has had as much money invested in it as Siri, they're not still really quite there to where you can even have, I'll say in America, we've got a game show. It's called Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? I don't think Siri is smarter than a fifth grader yet. So if you've got a kid in fifth grade school and you ask them a question, they're going to be able to answer it generally better than Siri can today. So when did this all begin? So it goes back to the 1950s, were the very first pieces of artificial intelligence. And we'll look at and go through the three different definitions here. If you're a business person, they're going to lump all of this, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning, they're going to call the whole thing AI. They're not really going to get into the granular details. If you're a data scientist or a researcher or a tech person, you may look at the difference between the three categories. So artificial intelligence, the overall general thing, and a bunch of stuff works into there. Machine learning, so this is where you take a bunch of data, and you'll see in the middle there, email. So email spam filtering is probably the best example of machine learning, where we feed a bunch of email through, and you give it a risk score that says, the algorithm learns and says, this is spam and this is not spam. How many people still get emails into their inbox that are spam every single day? We've been working on this for 20 years. So not only is Siri not good at answering questions of are you smarter than a fifth grader, but your spam filtering is not very good still at filtering out all of your spam. And it's not because there's a lack of people spending money on this. You've got companies like Microsoft and Google in those two cases that are spending tons and tons of dollars on research to try to make spam filtering better. Because if your email, if you can have the best spam filtering, you're going to have more email users, because no one likes getting spam in their inbox. And then, so the third one over, you get into deep learning. And this, the difference between machine learning and deep learning is, at the deep learning level, instead of one kind of neural network, nerdy AI term, there's actually multiple layers of them. So you'll run it through and it kind of does a regression analysis. So you don't just have one decision-making scoring algorithm, but you actually have multiple ones. Now, in this deep learning, they're getting it used for a lot of image recognition. So if you see the CAPTCHAs out on the internet, it says like, click on all the spots where there's a traffic signal, or click on all the spots with a crosswalk, or the rest of that. So the deep learning image recognition algorithms can't solve those puzzles. That's why they're used in CAPTCHAs. So when you wonder how smart is this image recognition deep learning stuff, it can't solve the picture CAPTCHA of, is there a crosswalk here, or a street light, or a car, or a bumper, or a front door, or whatever else. Back to, I think, again, your fifth grader probably can solve all of those CAPTCHAs just fine, and they can get through to wherever. But the smartest deep learning algorithms cannot consistently solve those. There's another one that in the U.S. and Texas when I give this talk, so it's a blueberry muffin or a chihuahua. You're probably maybe familiar with chihuahua, the little dogs, the Mexican dogs. So if you look out on the internet and search for blueberry muffin chihuahua, you'll see a grid of images. And this is one of the ones they use to try to train these deep learning algorithms. And any kid, even all the way down to maybe a 3 or 4 year old, can tell the difference between a blueberry muffin and the dog in the picture. But the image recognition can't, because the muffin has kind of the same color tones as the dog, and the eyes of the dog end up looking like the little blueberries in the muffin. And so because the algorithm doesn't know what a dog is, and it doesn't know what a muffin is, so it just knows that dogs or muffins have certain color patterns and other things on the image. So this is where these algorithms right now, they're very narrowly focused, and they're very smart at very narrow things. So chess, as an example. So does anyone here think they can beat the chess program on their phone at a game of chess? Okay, no hands should go up, because it can beat anybody in the world at this point. Even Magnus Carlsen can't beat his own cell phone at chess at this point. So chess has a very well narrow-defined set of rules, and if you're a computer and you can run through those rules, you can solve that. So in situations like chess, artificial intelligence will seem brilliant. It's not brilliant, it's just really good at a very narrow set of rules. So then you get out to another game like Go. So in chess now, the computers are so fast, it can effectively, exhaustively search through every chess move. In a game like Go, it still has to jump ahead and guess. It makes some approximations. But what we saw when the algorithms played Lee Sedol, so the humans have been playing Go for hundreds and hundreds of years. When AlphaGo, which was a research project at Google, beat Lee Sedol, the world's best Go player, it played a strategy and a move that no human would have ever played. This is some of the danger of when we unleash AI into a system. It's going to have behavior that's going to be unpredictable, because it's coming at the problem from a different direction. Just like when it's looking at that picture, it can't tell the difference between a muffin and a dog. It didn't know that this was a crazy strategy to use in Go. It's like, this seems like a good thing to go do, and it went and did it, and it actually worked. It beat Lee, and it's actually changed some of the future and strategy of the game of Go. So now we fast forward. Anyone in the audience recognize this? So this is Dota 2. So this is a real-time strategy war game. So you've got superheroes, they've got powers, they battle with each other. And so now you've got a project called OpenAI, where they're working on training an AI system to not play chess or not play Go, but to run a real-time strategy war game. Is this terrifying to anyone in the audience? Because it's actually really good at it. And the people that it's playing against aren't just a bunch of kids that are amateurs. OpenAI is playing against teams that are playing for 18 million euros. So the winning team in the Dota 2 championship wins 5 million euros. So the 5 players in the team, they each get €1 million if they win this tournament. So these people are serious. They know how to play the game. They're teams, they coaches, they have practice just like any other sports franchise. OpenAI is beating those teams now at Dota 2. Now, it's not doing it the same way we would do it by typing on a keyboard or moving a mouse around and looking at images and processing it. It is restricted to the same number of actions per minute. That's a gaming term of like how quick can humans do different things. So it's not playing faster, but it is playing differently and smarter. It is receiving kind of a vector feed, and it's kind of the API that would help your graphics card draw the pictures on the screen. OpenAI is looking at the game at that level and sending information back at that level. So it's not up to the point where you've got a robot that is moving a mouse and clicking a keyboard and looking at images, but they are doing strategy and tactics in the game, using the same actions per minute as humans, and again, changing the strategy in the way we play the game. So this is going through from a game side of things. This stuff is getting used elsewhere outside of that as well. So I've talked a little bit about kind of how smart the computers can be and also how dumb they can be. So this is one of the world's fastest supercomputers. It's called Summit. It's from the American Department of Energy. And so this computer draws about the same amount of electricity as a city that has 10,000 people living in it, so maybe 3,000 to 4,000 homes or apartments. It can do 1/7 of what the human brain does. So it takes 7 seconds if you're using the Summit supercomputer to model 1 second of human brain activity. So this is where, again, the AI is very narrowly focused. It can be very brilliant in a narrow area, but it can't do all of the things that the human brain does still at this point. So any of you seen The Matrix? And you wonder why the little drones had us in pods? It was effectively, this is a better processor than Intel has ever made. And in the movie there, they basically figured out how to hook our head up and use it as a CPU. Because we draw a lot less electricity than 10,000 homes. Like you can feed a human much less food than it takes to make that much electricity. So it's going to be a while until we have, like this, everyone talks about the singularity and artificial general intelligence. The computing power just isn't there to allow it to go do that. AI will continue to get brilliant in very deep areas, but it's not going to be brilliant in a broad, wide area. It's not going to be able to learn the same way your children can learn or the way that we learned. So, if you're going to work on introducing AI into society, my first recommendation here is make it cute. So this is the Waymo car from Google, and they got permission to drive this around on the streets in Silicon Valley. If they would have made the car look like this, do you think anybody would have approved it? Not a chance. But this car running into you, if it's driving around on its own, if it hits you, it's going to hurt the same as this car. This one's not cute. It's terrifying, and people would be afraid of it. So if you're out there working on an AI project, just make it cute, and it'll get approved. People won't be terrified of it. They should be, but they won't. So now, how are hackers using all this stuff today? So kind of gone through the state of AI and where things are at. So from the hackers, they're using it to help get themselves inside the network. So if you're a hacker, just like a salesperson, once you've got a really good quality lead, and like you can spend the time and energy to work that. But further up, like to actually get the lead, so hackers want to be inside of someone's network. They're using the AI to help them gain access. And we're actually really bad at discovering that someone's broken into our networks. It takes about 180 days on average for us to find out that someone's been inside of our network. The reason why we know it takes 180 days is because 180 days later, the hackers finally do something bad in your network, and then forensic guys like me go back and trace our way back, and they go, those hackers got in back here in, let's see, right now we're in July, August, September. So they got in March. And they've been in your network since March, and we can track the trail of breadcrumbs through and see it's been 180 days. So how are hackers out there and doing this? So they're going through in a few different ways, and there's some different tools that are out there, and papers and some stuff have been published. If you follow the cybersecurity world, there's a conference called Black Hat. It's a good spot to see kind of what are some of the current trends. Black Hat's a conference where you get a little bit of a bleed and crossover between what the folks that are not good guys doing and what the good guys are doing to try to protect against it. But there's a project out there called the Spider Artificial Intelligence Vulnerability Scanner. So it goes crawling around websites and other things to look for previously undetected flaws. So if you've seen on your browser these days where like Google Chrome or basically all of them are built off that engine other than Apple's browser, where you've gotten these security things and the little light up in the corner goes red, and it's been going red like every week. That's because there's folks that are doing these algorithms and using it to scan for unknown vulnerabilities. They're finding them, and with that, they're getting inside of systems. So the second area where they're getting used, while Siri can't have a great conversation with you, Siri can write some and stuff that's reasonably believable and kind of funny. So if you kind of combine the ability of everything we share out there on social, stuff that's published on LinkedIn, people can see pictures of me at all sorts of different sites, you can train an AI to write an email that will look reasonably like it came from me. And if it gets emailed to one of my employees, it's going to reasonably look like it came from me. It might be in words that I use. The hackers could send an email to my staff in Texas right now. They know that I'm in Dublin, Ireland. I've been published as a speaker at this conference for weeks. So they could say, and you could have these hackers, the artificial intelligence gathers this information about Bret, sends an email to my staff in Texas right now saying, hey, I need you to go do X, Y, Z while I'm in Dublin. Pretty believable. And the hacker didn't actually have to do anything there other than steal one of our computers and then use that to go do the research. So one of the other drawbacks for us good guys is we have to buy computers to train to use the artificial intelligence. Hackers hack into our computer. They use our capital expense to buy the computer. They use our electricity to run the computer to train their AI. So they've got a real advantage here on the artificial intelligence side of things because they don't have to pay for the computers or the electricity. And so the other one, you're seeing a ton of this now, whether you've got WhatsApp or any social network. All of these bots and other things out there are sending a lot of times garbage messages. Every once in a while, they're starting to get pretty good, and it's pretty scary. So how many folks here develop custom software? Anybody? So here's what hackers are using to test that software, that whether you develop it or you purchase it. So VDiscover, another open source project, and I use these open source ones because they're easy for you to go look at, you can test and see yourself. But this software effectively writes its own tests. It will go run against there until it finds a flaw in the software. When VDiscover finds a flaw, then the hacker can dig in and see if they can turn that flaw into a full level exploit. So this is allowing them, again, to use their time much more efficiently, and they're using our computing resources, so it doesn't cost them any money to develop and run these tests. So now that the hackers are using our computers and they've got all of this automated testing to find these level attacks, we're going to see much more of what you saw here back, and this is one of the original internet worms back in 2004. This is how quickly it spread across the internet then. Today, though, the difference is back then they wrote really noisy worms, and like it got detected. Everyone knew this was happening because these things sucked up all the computing resources. Now the hackers are much more sophisticated, and while their worm will spread very quickly, they'll do it in a way that doesn't use a lot of resources so it doesn't get detected. But when these new exploits are coming out, things are flowing across lots of networks into lots of systems very quickly. We're just not seeing it as well today as we did in the past because they're getting better at infiltrating without being noisy. So there was a great study done. This is out of Oxford in the UK. They got a group of researchers together in 2017. The full report is up at that maliciousAIreport.com URL. You can go download the whole thing and take a read. It's about 20 pages. And just some really good research and synthesis from about 25 or 30 authors that are researchers in this market and this space. Okay, now that you're terrified, what the heck can you do? So we got to wrap it up and bring it home. So how many folks in the audience here have been through a security awareness training program? All my employees in the back better raise their hand. Okay. Yeah, so here's the sad truth out there is only 1 in 3 people have actually ever been trained. And the hackers only have to get in once. So even if there's like 99 out of 100 of your employees actually take the training program and one of them just refuses to, the one that's refusing to is likely the one that was going to be most vulnerable to begin with. So you've got to start doing some real training and some real testing. So like we have internally, we have a phishing email program that sends out phishing emails to our employees. And they'll come from me, they come from Bret.Piatt at CyberFortress.com. They look legitimate, all of these things, and they've got a URL that says, click on me. And like our staff needs to be able to look at that and go, you know what, Bret didn't send that. And they've got to be able to determine that, because if not, back to where I talked earlier, that artificial intelligence spearfisher is going to write stuff that looks like it comes from me. They're going to spoof all the things correctly. So you've got to start doing this in a realistic and believable way, because the hackers are doing it in a realistic, believable way to all of your staff if you're not doing it. So the second one, user-generated passwords. Terrible. If you let users pick their own passwords, they're going to pick something like their kid's name and the year their kid was born. So they've gotten their way to 8 characters and they've used a letter and a number. But again, if I'm that artificial intelligent hacker, I'm going out there and searching the public record databases so I know what your kids' names are, what year your kids were born, and I can run through, we can find out what your dog's name is, because I'm a hacker, I've probably broken into your veterinarian and stolen the records from your vet, so I've got all of this data merged together. I may even have gotten data on the vehicle you drive, so I might know your car name and the year you bought that car if you're being really sneaky. So letting users pick passwords is a generally terrible idea. And so there's tons of password managers out there. That's one step, but really what you should be doing is using multi-factor authentication, whether it's a physical hardware token or a software token or even the SMS on there, you should have log into sensitive systems should be something you know, which is a password, and something you have, which is that token. Because the hacker can't ever get the something you have, even if they can't guess the something you have. They have to either SMS hijack or something else, but it makes getting into your account an order of magnitude more difficult. Okay, so rapid testing. This has to happen now, and when there are these zero-day exploits. So like in your Chrome web browser, you'll see normally up there the little update thing, it'll go yellow for a while, then eventually it'll go orange, and it'll kind of beg you, please reboot me and reset me, and I'm gonna bring all your tabs back, trust me. It's saying that to you. None of us trust it to bring the tabs back. We know when we click that thing, they're all gonna get goofed up. But when you see it go red immediately these days, that's because like the Chrome team has detected something that is real serious. And so this is an example going back to 2014. So if you see that CVE number, then 2014 dash the thing. So this is a common vulnerability exchange, and then they circle them by the year and then by the exploit. So this was against a system, and so they got 1 day, so the CVE gets published out. And it's been published because a hacker has found the flaw. They've published it out because these are good guy hackers, so sharing it, so everyone that's running this piece of software now knows this vulnerability is out there. That CVE was then grabbed by a hacking team. They went from 1 day from that to reverse engineering their own proof of concept. And initially you had to actually not only be evil, and you had to be computer skilled in order to be a hacker. Now you actually just have to be evil and have to have some money. So there's a marketplace out there where you can go buy all these tools. So that proof of concept got packaged up and then put onto, and this is even back in 2014, 8 years ago, onto a dark web marketplace. It got bought by another team, and 3 days later we were seeing that exploit out there in the wild. So CVE published, smart person puts up the thing, weaponizes it, puts it on a marketplace for sale. It's like a digital arms merchant. And then 8 days in there, so 3 days initial rough exploit, 5 more days, this is now at plugin kit level. So this is basically, if you can install an extension in a Chrome web browser, you could now take that hack and you could go hack systems. So within 10 days, so 2 days after the kit plugin, people had scanned enough systems, they got into some US.gov systems, and they downloaded some stuff from 35 days they'd worked their way through. This was a Java-related exploit, if I remember this one correctly. And they were able to then get into some aerospace systems and download aerospace designs of things from the government. Pretty scary in 35 days. So if you're on a 90-day patch cycle, they were in and done and out with 55 days to spare. If these things are coming out now and they're serious, you have to patch them immediately. If you're waiting and your test cycles are 60 or 90 days, they're going to be in and out with whatever you were trying to protect before you get there. So the last one here is in the security operations centers. We've been running what's a security information management system or a security event information system. You've got to go now to an analytics platform architecture. So this is where you're feeding in a ton of data and you're using at least some of your own machine learning, some data science, and some other things to start detecting abnormal behavior on your network. So something like you wouldn't see through a traditional SOC platform would be an employee opening up or scanning 20 folders on your network share. If that employee normally only goes to 2 different folders on your network drives to be able to do their daily work and they go to 20, an analytics platform would notice that change in behavior. It's an order of magnitude different, but your traditional tools would not. And if all of a sudden that employee is going to 20, chances are something might be wrong on their system. It's not them actually doing it. Yeah, this is not an easy one to go make a change. It's a fundamental change in both the business processes inside the operations center and it's a new tech platform behind all of it. So, last one. We've got a new SIM platform. We've got everything else. How many folks here have administrative access to a system? Okay. Yeah, hacker gets into your account. How dangerous is that? Yeah, we get hacked too, even as administrators. We hope that never does happen, but this is the one where if you've got real sensitive systems, sensitive data, you need to keep 2 copies of it in the custody of 2 separate people. So like in the movies, you always have like the nuclear key where like there's like one person with the key and somebody else with the code. look, it's not nuclear weapons, but we do have systems and data inside of all of our operations that are that important to our own business. And we should have it to where you have two separate administrative accounts in charge of either the primary or secondary copy, or if you can, you make it to where there's one person who's a drafter that's allowed to authorize and set up a change, and somebody else has to then go in and approve it. You don't have one person that's allowed to initiate a change and approve the change. So if you can separate and segregate those duties, you can keep things safe. It's kind of like back to multi-factor authentication. This is kind of multi-person administration, and it's more time-consuming. It's a headache. It sucks. It sucks way less than your most important business app getting ransomware or hacked or completely destroyed. So, yeah, I've talked a little bit about safe second copy. So, like going through your data inventory, what kind of computers are they? How long do you need to keep this regulatory-wise? There's some sets of questions. Anyone who wants a copy of these slides, I'll have my email address up at the end. You can email me. We'll send those out, or you can come drop by our booth over in the middle of the floor. I think we are C7. Is that believable, team? C7. Okay. Yeah. So back to where we began. So look, AI and ML are starting to see practical things out in the market. Very narrow, specific business processes you can train them on, and they'll do a great job. But even things as what seems specific to us, spam filtering, CAPTCHAs, that's still a problem that they haven't really been able to solve. Hackers are creative, though, so they are figuring out how to take that narrow knowledge and use it in ways to save them time and make them more efficient, and it's making it harder for us to do our work. And look, start your own program. If you aren't working on this in your company, do some security training, have some real tabletop exercises and games, and then if you can, separate things out, have a double do, have separation of administration and not just multi-factor auth, and you'll at least be ahead of most of the hackers. You still may not be hacker-proof, and if you've got somebody who is very motivated and skilled attacker right now, it is very challenging to keep things up and going. I really recommend at that point kind of even a cold storage offline kind of air gap, fully separated backup copy of the records that you, if you lost, you wouldn't be able to easily recreate. With that, thank you all for coming out, and we'll move. I don't know how much time I have left. It's been so long since I spoke at a conference. I've got 5 minutes, so we can do some Q&A. He's got holding up the sign there in the back. But thank you all for coming, and appreciate having a full crowd here, even a little standing room only in the back.
Thank you, Bret. Absolutely fascinating. I used to work with Berkeley Research Group, and we did some work on cybersecurity preparedness. And what was interesting was organizations were pursuing everything you could think of from a digital perspective, AI, machine learning, etc., but gave no consideration to the cybersecurity implications of it. I'm just wondering, from a board and a leadership perspective, how do we get them to think about not just as a technology issue, but actually this is a business issue?
Yeah, so the technology and the security of your business processes is really a business problem. So, and you don't have to have a whole super fancy advanced team. I think you can go sit down at a lunch table with 4 or 5 people in your organization and start to ask some questions. So like list down and have everybody at the table list down the top 3 most important applications inside your company. So let's pretend for a minute that I'm a hospital. So I've got my patient record management app that checks all the people in the hospital, figures out who's in what rooms. The second application I have is one that's monitoring all of those things that are hooked up to all the people in the rooms. That's pretty important. And then the third one might be, it lets me do all of my advanced lab testing and all those. So I've got 3 systems there in the hospital. And so you can sit down at the table, you could figure out in your business what are those 3. And then you ask, okay, what happens if the system's offline for an hour? What would change in our business processes? What happens if the system's offline for a day? And then what happens if the system's offline for a week? And usually, depending on how critical it is, in the hospital, at the hour level, they're like, man, if we can't monitor all the devices hooked up to all of our patients, and during that hour, I have to have nurses running around room to room to make sure that everybody's still okay, at least in the ICU. Maybe in some of the other areas we don't. But when you get down to almost any business and you go, this system's going to be offline for a week, people in operations and customer service and manufacturing, they start to panic. They're like, well, what do you mean we won't have our thing for a week? So And if you get out to the real one, it's what if you won't have it for a month? So in America, so the Colonial Pipeline, did you guys hear about that one over here?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a pipeline that runs from a lot of the oil refineries in the south of the U.S. up to the northeast, delivers gas. So they had backups for all their systems, 1,500 servers. And they got ransomware, and what they hadn't done is this little tabletop exercise of sit down and figure out under a scenario how long will it take. So while they had a backup, it was going to take them 42 days to restore. Well, gas stations run out of petrol in 3 days. So 39 days before those backups would be restored, you've got a lot of really upset people that don't have gas to put in their cars. So this very simple exercise of what are the 3 most important things, and then if something happened, how long is it going to be offline, and then how would the business adapt in those scenarios when it is offline? You go through that risks piece, and folks, all of a sudden, all the way up at the and board level people can understand this. Like, this didn't require any fancy tech stuff at all. You'll start to see board members who were accountants or other things where they start looking like this of, oh God, could that really happen? And it can, and it has.
Yeah, fascinating. If there's any burning question, we can take it.
And if not, I'll be hanging out back by our booth here through lunchtime. So again, thank you all for coming out this morning. Appreciate the audience, and I'm so happy to be back in front of people again.
And Bret, it is 4:30 in the morning for you, so well done. Bret flew in yesterday, he's flying out again tonight. So yeah, fantastic to have you here, so thank you very much.
Yeah, greatly appreciate it.